Hey, welcome to One Man's Faith today. I'm glad you could make it. And my name is Neal Owen, and we're going to look at the Word of God, and we're going to just glean some things from this book, because it is, as I said, I think last week, it is living and active. Just as God is living and active, His Word is living and active. He gave this Word to us so we would know more about Him. And that's what we're going to be looking at today, is how do we know more about God so that we can draw closer to Him. Before I start that, though, let me just make a couple of announcements, One of them is that there's a revival that starts Thursday. It goes Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. The main event starts at 7 o'clock each night. Bring a friend, bring somebody that doesn't know the Lord, and come out with them and pray for them, and let them hear the Word come forth into their ears and into their hearts, and change their lives forever. It should be a great time. It's down on Mance. Now, if you're going from 160 down Homestead, you would turn left on Mance just before, about quarter mile before Terrible's, down there, Terrible's Lakeside. Turn left on Mance and go down maybe 200 feet, and you should see the tent behind the fence there, and there's a poster on the fence that says Pahrump Tent Revival, and that's where it will be. If you're coming up Homestead towards 160, you would turn right on Mance, okay? And if you're down on Mance, or you're coming off of Cass or Hafen Ranch over there, and you're coming up Mance toward Homestead, it will be on the left. If you're turning off of Homestead, it will be on the right. But there's a sign there that says Tent Revival, Pahrump Tent Revival, and you should see the big tent back on there. There's a gate. There's a gate that you'll go through and go around. They'll have it marked. But just to let you know, this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at 7 o'clock. Okay? Also, at New Hope Fellowship, we will be showing God is Not Dead on October 7th. Is that right? Yes. There it is, October 7th at 7 o'clock. It's a movie called God is Not Dead. A college student is given a task, I think, to prove. Actually, it's kind of based on the professor is an atheist, and I think they are to prove God is dead, but this student takes it to heart and proves God isn't dead. It's going to be a good movie. So that's October 7th at 7 o'clock. All right. So let's go on. Let's first turn to Genesis 1, the very first chapter and first verse in the Bible, and we're going to open up with that. Genesis 1:1. You probably know this. It says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." And it goes on, and let's see. I'm going to jump over to verse 24, "And God said, 'Let the earth bring forth living creatures of their kind, cattle and creeping things and beasts of the earth after their kind,' and it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground after its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, 'Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth.' And God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created him. And God blessed them, and God said, 'Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. This is a kind of a mega glance at creation. If you go over into chapter 2, it says in verse 7, and God formed man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Okay? With everything else, God said, let there be. But with man, he created man. He formed man out of the dust and then breathed into him, and man became a living being. No other creature is created in the image of God. We did not come from apes or whatever, as some would want you to believe. We were created by God in his image. And so last week we started looking at the authority that we have, and more specifically we were looking, and we're going to continue to look today at authority exchange. God created things, he passed it to man, man blew it, and he allowed Satan to have control. All right? And we were looking at I think 8 things last week. And the first one is God is God. God's going to do what he wants to do. But God was in the beginning. There was nothing else. We don't know anything else. It's not part of what we are to know. We can guess, we can speculate, we can make sometimes dumb assumptions, and we looked at that a little bit, where there is I guess a theory out that says that the earth was formed before, and Satan had control over it, but it got so bad that God flooded the earth, and that's why it says that the Spirit was over the surface of the deep. Well, no, there's nothing that tells us that. All we know is that God said, and things happened. All right, so God is God. All right, God created the worlds. He created the universe. He put everything in its place. And it's just fantastic if you start to look at how the planets have to be aligned the way they are. They even believe that if Jupiter were to fly out of orbit or something like that, it would totally mess up Mercury and Venus. It would, and that's the only, and they say that's what's holding them in their constant orbit. And all of what we know about the planets and their orbits, we can predict out into the future when things are going to happen, because it stays so perfect, because God said, let there be, and let it be this way. God created the world, and then God, as we just read, God created man, or mankind. He created Adam. And as we just read too, it says that he gave them dominion and authority. All right? God blessed them, this is chapter 1, verse 28, and said, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, rule over. So we have a mandate from God. Subdue the earth and rule over it. Rule over the fish, the birds, and everything else. All right? He gave that to us. And then God set up a garden, and he put Adam and Eve in the garden. Now, yeah, he put Adam and Eve in the garden, and he came down and he would meet with them on a daily basis, or it appeared daily. He would meet with them constantly. He was having a relationship with them in which they learned from him, and he could marvel at the creatures that were made in his image. But we sinned. We sinned. Man became disconnected from God spiritually because of our sin. God had to drive us out of the garden so that we wouldn't eat of the tree of life and end up being forever stuck in sin and away from God. He needed a way to bring us back to him, to have redemption. And if we'd eaten from the tree of life, then that wouldn't have been possible. So God's love for us was such that he formed a plan on what he was going to do. And then man became ruled by his flesh, his mind, and sin. Man became ruled by his flesh, his mind, and sin. And lastly, last week we looked at Satan usurped man's authority by controlling man through his flesh and mind and hijacking his mouth and words. And we looked at the fact that our words mean things because we are made in God's image. When God said things created, therefore being made in his image, when we say things, we create things. And we looked at Proverbs 18:21, I believe it was, that says life and death are in the power of the tongue. So that you can speak life or you can speak death. And if you're speaking death, you are propagating Satan's rule. If you speak life, you're propagating God. And we're going to continue from that. But these are, this is kind of a history, but it's important to understand. When man sinned, God did not take the authority away from man. Man is still in control. God's in charge, but man's in control. And we've got to understand God set up, even though it doesn't specifically say this, but God set up kind of a law or rule that said, okay, man's in charge, I'm not going to interfere. And we've got to see that. Man did not have his authority usurped from him by God. So think about that, and we're going to continue on with this. We got to take a break. Let's take one, and I'll be right back.